When I observed this fern in Negeri Sembilan, Malaysia, I took some snapshots and uploaded them online. From that, I got a tentative identification, Lindsaea ensifolia from the Lindsaeaceae family. Just a quick note, my pronunciation of these scientific names might not always be spot on, so my apologies there. Now, identifying a fern accurately, based solely on a general aspect, isn't always enough. That's why I decided to delve deeper into the morphological features of this group of plants. Interestingly, species now placed in the Lindsaeaceae family have in the past been assigned to or mistaken for families like Davalliaceae, Dennstaedtiaceae, or even Pteridaceae. Why this confusion? Well, they share some common features, such as a marginal or near marginal sori and creeping rhizomes. However, many Lindsaeoid ferns have a unique vascular structure in their rhizomes cross-section, the Lindsaeoid protostele. This is a central vascular cylinder of xylem surrounded by phloem without a central pith or endodermis. I also discovered other characters that distinguished the Lindsaeaceae family from those fern families with appearances superficially similar. Unlike Lindsaeaceae, Dennstaedtiaceae often have hairs instead of true scales. Davalliaceae have thick, extremely scaly rhizomes, and Pteridaceae are known for their false indusia. So such details further support classifying my sampled species as belonging to the Lindsaeaceae family. While I'm focusing on general morphology here, it's worth noting that molecular data has been crucial in confirming Lindsaeaceae as a separate family and in defining the genera within it. The current understanding incorporating this molecular data supports the delimitation into the following genera: Sphenomeris, Odontosoria, Nesolindsaea, Osmolindsaea, Tapeinidium, and Lindsaea. There are still some ambiguities and ongoing research, so we might see more genera and updating of species assignments. However, based on the currently accepted species and genera within Lindsaeaceae and using only morphological data, the species I found identifies as Lindsaea and not another genus within the family. Let's look at some differences seen between the fern found and other genera, though the lack of morphological discontinuities does make identification based solely on morphology difficult. The Odontosoria and Sphenomeris genera are much more branched, whereas my specimen is one pinnate. Also, Lindsaea typically has continuous sori along the pinnae margin, terminal on many veins, with a linear indusium that opens towards the margin and is quite free laterally. Sphenomeris and Odontosoria, in contrast, have an indusium fixed at the base and sides, and their sori are terminal on only 1 to 3 veins. The Tapeinidium genus usually has only a slight adaxial groove on its axis, with sori on the lateral lobes of a single vein, often without a prominent indusium. The indusium is pouch-shaped and the spores are monolete. The fern I sampled, like many Lindsaea, shows a prominent adaxial falcation on its axis, sori continuous along the margin, terminal on many veins, with a prominent linear indusium opening towards the margin and spores tri-leaf. The Osmolindsaea genus often has a solenostele with an internal sclerified pith, which helps distinguish it from Lindsaea, which typically has a Lindsaeoid protostele. Additionally, my Lindsaea specimen has tri-leaf spores, although some Lindsaea species do have monoleaf spores, whereas Osmolindsaea has monoleaf spores. The Nesolindsaea genus is differentiated from Lindsaea by often having interrupted sori rather than continuous ones, and generally having a vein order of 3 instead of the vein order of 2 as in many Lindsaea. The Xyropteris, represented by Xyropteris strautii, which might form another genus, looks quite similar, but its ultimate laminar segments have free veins and a large basal acroscopic auricle. The specimen I found, however, has anastomosing veins and ultimate segments that lack that large basal auricle, which could place it among the Lindsaea. So with all this information, I now have more confidence that the fern I sampled is indeed from the genus Lindsaea and the family Lindsaeaceae. The genus Lindsaea is incredibly diverse, as seen in the 29 or so species recorded in Malaysia by Paris and Latif in 1997. Most Malaysian Lindsaea species have ultimate frond segments that are demediate, flabellate, or cuneate. Think asymmetrical, fan-shaped, or wedge-shaped. Among the species with such pinnae, which are distinctly different from the sample, are Lindsaea bornensis, Lindsaea boylodi, Lindsaea cavifolia, Lindsaea crispa, Lindsaea caltrata, Lindsaea divergens, Lindsaea dorifora, Lindsaea gomphophylla, Lindsaea guriniana, Lindsaea integra, Lindsaea hewittii, Lindsaea jamesonoides, Lindsaea javanensis, Lindsaea lucida, Lindsaea lobata, Lindsaea meliensis, Lindsaea napier, Lindsaea oblanceolata, Lindsaea obtusa, Lindsaea obliculata, Lindsaea ovata, Lindsaea parallelogramma, Lindsaea rapens, Lindsaea richida, and Lindsaea sarawakensis. The specimen I found has ultimate segments that are lanceolate, linear, or narrowly ovate, as has been described for Lindsaea ensifolia. Species with similarly shaped ultimate segments, but which can be ruled out due to the differences, are Lindsaea heterophylla, which has gradual tapering of upper pinnae, long undivided pinnae apices, and veins irregularly anastomosing. Lindsaea walkeri, which has a dark stipe and free veins, and the more recently discovered Lindsaea cocongensis, which is found in moist areas and has free veins. Thus, the initial species identification as Lindsaea ensifolia seems correct and is supported by the presence of the following characteristics which are reported for Lindsaea ensifolia. Small to medium-sized, terrestrial, rhizome thin, creeping, adorned with light reddish-brown, bristly, narrowly triangular scales, rhizome cross-section revealing a Lindsaeoid protostele. Stipe, straw-colored to reddish-brown at the base, grooved and generally glabrous. Its cross-section shows a single U or V-shaped vascular bundle. Fronds, simple and one-pinnate, forming a narrow oblong ovate or linear blade, typically 15 to 50 centimeters long. The lamina is generally thin, glabrous, and a deep green color. Pinnae, 2 to 7 pairs of lateral pinnae, which can be spreading and strongly ascending. The terminal pinnae resembles the lateral pinnae and usually stands alone. Individual pinnae are oblong lanceolate to linear, acuminate at the apex, cuneate rounded or subtruncate at the base, very shortly stalked with smooth margins, though sterile ones might be toothed. Venation, anastomosing, sorry, linear and continuous, lining the pinnae margins, protected by a linear indusium that opens outwards. Spores, trilete. And at the subspecies level, based on its conformed terminal pinnae, Sphenomeris raches, abaxially sulcate up to or into the terminal pinnae, and nearly always dentate margins on the sterile pinnae, at least at the basal part, I would say my sample is Lindsaea ensifolia, subspecies ensifolia. In contrast, subspecies agati has upper pinnae that are gradually narrowed and the apex pinnatified, while subspecies Coriaceae has a darker raches, abaxially not sharply biangular, and entire margins on sterile pinnae. Here are a few references I used that helped me identify the Lindsaeoid fern I found. If you found this video informative, do support the channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing. Thank you so much for your support.